The front tire on my TW200 is really starting to look and feel like a jagged mess, so let's go ahead and change it. I will be replacing this tire with the exact same Shinko SR244 Golden Boy that I already have on here. The size I'm using is a 5.10-18, but there's also a thinner 4.60-18 size available that will fit. These are standard sizes, so the first number just relates to both the width and the sidewall height in inches. Then of course the 18 just represents the diameter of the wheel or rim size in inches as well. In comparison, the wider tire would be a little bit better for traction, while the thinner one should give you a little bit lighter steering feel. The stock tire that comes on this bike is a Bridgestone Trail Wing TW34, size 130/80-18. Some people call it the death wing. This is a metric tire size, meaning the width is 130 millimeters, with the sidewall being 80% of that number, which equals 104 millimeters, yet it still uses the 18 inches for the rim size. So converting that measurement to a standard size, you can see the width of the two tires is very close, but the Shinko does have a taller sidewall. The main reason I'm replacing this tire is for the abnormal wear on the knobs, which is causing some vibration. As you can see, every other knob is worn at a different height, along with some slanting. The stock tire also suffered from slanted knobs and didn't last nearly as long as this tire has. Unfortunately, knobby tires in general tend to wear unevenly when used on pavement a lot, especially the front one, it seems. One thing to help prevent this is to use a higher air pressure, but I have always just used the stock 18 PSI. Shinko does state that this particular tire is okay for front or rear fitment and is DOT approved for use on the street. Also, in case you are wondering how old your tire is, you can look at the last 4 digits of the DOT number. The first 2 represent which week it is out of 52, and the last 2 represent the year. Before we get started, it's a good idea to lift up the bike, and while the handlebar is in the middle, push and pull the wheel to feel for any free play in the steering head bearings. Then, kinda weird, but hold the tire between your knees and try to turn the handlebars back and forth to feel for any wheel bearing free play. My bearings feel good with no wiggle room, and this is definitely something you would want to check once in a while that will keep your TW safe while riding. When working on your bike, it's always a good idea to wear eye protection because you never know when something could go flying. And of course, if you don't feel 100% comfortable working on your bike, I would recommend taking it to a shop, because you are solely responsible for the work you do on your own bike. Alright, with the bike back on the ground, I'll grab my toolkit just because I want to see if I'm able to change the tire using the tools I carry with me on every ride. Next, I'll unscrew the cap for the speedometer cable, and it'll most likely only be hand tight, but if not, you can gently use some pliers to loosen it. Then the cable will just pull out, and be aware there is a small O-ring that should be sitting right here. Then I'll grab my crescent wrench and adjust it to fit the axle bolt. While holding it in place, I'll grab the 19mm wrench and try to loosen the nut. I'm not able to put enough torque on the wrench, so I'll double wrench it with the 22mm I also carry with me. I'm able to spin the axle bolt but not break it free because I can't apply enough torque on the small crescent wrench, so I grabbed my vice grips and clamped them on the back of the wrench. Super janky, but I was finally able to pop it loose. After the nut spins freely, I'll go ahead and jack the bike up. Next, go ahead and remove the nut and washer and push the axle bolt through. While supporting the wheel, remove the bolt and slide it out towards the front. Go ahead and pull the spacer off and then flip it around, and the speedometer gear will slide right off as well. With the wheel off, be careful not to depress the front brake lever since there is no longer a rotor between the brake pads. Next, I'll grab a trash can, slap my old rear tire on it, and then place the front tire and wheel at the top. This is just to make it easier than trying to change it on the floor. I'll remove the valve stem cap and use my Schrader valve tool to remove the valve core and let all the air out. The spokes kinda got in the way, but I still was able to make it work. Then I'll use my crescent wrench to remove the valve stem nut. Next, I'll grab my Bead Pro set and insert the forked one between the tire and the rim. Then take the other one and insert it between the forked one and press them together and down to break the bead. I'll do this around the tire until the bead is fully broken on this side. Then I'll flip the wheel over and break the bead on the other side in the exact same way. Next, I'll use the Bead Buddy 2 to help press one side of the tire bead into drop dead center, while simultaneously on the other side use the lever end of the Bead Pro to pry the tire bead over the rim. It helps to use the slight curve of the lever to essentially scoop up the bead. If the tire bead seems to be fighting you, the opposite side is probably not in drop dead center, which is causing the tire to overstretch. While holding the bead over the rim, I'll use the other one to lever out the next part. I'll work my way around until this side of the tire is off. Also, if you don't want to risk scratching up your wheel, it's a good idea to use rim protectors, which I used in my rear tire video, but I didn't use them this time because my wheel is already scratched up and I don't carry them on my bike. Next, push the valve stem through the hole and pull the inner tube out. This inner tube seems to still be in good shape, so I'm just gonna reuse it. Then from the top, push a lever through and grab a bottom bead with it and lever it up over the rim. While holding, grab the other lever and do the same right next to the first one. Place the Bead Buddy in the gap so the bead is held in place and you can remove the levers. Use the levers to little by little pull the bottom bead up over the rim until the tire can be pulled off. This part is a bit more difficult since the top bead tends to get in the way. Next, go ahead and inspect the tube protector band for any damage and that it's positioned correctly, lining up with the valve stem hole. By the way, the new tire is only about 1.5 years old from when it was first made, and this tire doesn't matter which direction it spins, but some tires are directional, so just be aware of that when you're installing a different tire. Next, I'll spray a soapy water mixture on both beads and slide the bottom over half of the wheel. Insert the Bead Buddy between the rim and the bead to keep the tire from sliding back off. Then I'll lever the bottom bead one part at a time until the tire pops on. Do use caution though, because levers can go flying. Next, take the inner tube and insert the valve stem back through the hole. This part is really difficult because you have to squish your fingers between the wheel and the bead to be able to push it through. However, there is a special tool to make this easy, but I still haven't gotten it yet. Once you're lucky enough to get it through, quickly thread the nut on and insert the rest of the tube. I'll spray some more soapy water and lever the first part over the rim. Then I'll lever the next part over and insert the Bead Buddy to keep it in place. Then I'll work my way around the tire, levering it on, being careful not to pinch the tube. Once on, I'll wiggle the tire around a little bit to make sure the tube is free floating and not being pinched. Lining the valve stem up so it's not crooked, I'll go ahead and thread the nut all the way on so it's nice and snug. I'll go ahead and flip the air compressor on and fill the tire up until both beads are fully seated on the wheel and let the air back out. Next, I'll stand the tire up against something so the valve stem is about at the 8 o'clock position. I will be using counteract balancing beads like I did with the rear tire. I'll go ahead and pour one 3-ounce bag into the bottle. I'll screw on the lid and remove the red cap. Then tightly fit the included hose over the nozzle, attach to the valve stem, and start pouring the beads in. They get clogged up easily, and this part was extremely difficult last time, but someone gave me an idea to use the vibration from the back of an electric engraver. So this mixed with slowly adding the beads and pumping air in and out of the bottle, I was able to get all of the beads in there very easily this time. Also, make sure the hose doesn't slip off during this process, and a big thanks to whoever gave me the idea for the vibration. Next, I'll install the special counteractive valve core and snug up the valve stem nut. Then I'll air up the tire to the stock 18 psi, install the valve stem cap, and don't forget to remove any old balancing weights since the tire will now be rebalanced every time the wheel spins. Next, I'll clean any dirt out of both sides of the wheel hub where the bearings are using a clean paper towel. This is also a good time to spin the bearings with your finger to make sure they move smoothly and are not loose. Mine still feel great. Now I'm just going to carefully clean the speedometer gear assembly, making sure not to let dirt fall in past the seal. I'm also going to go ahead and clean the spacer up as well. As you can see, there are 2 tabs on the wheel hub that sit between the 3 tabs in the speedometer assembly, which drives a gear, and that in turn drives the cable. There's also a radial seal that helps keep the dirt out and the grease in. I'll show you how to take this apart and rebuild it in another video, but this time I'll just add some new lithium soap grease, work it in, and clean off any excess. Next, go ahead and insert the axle bolt into the first hole, grab the wheel, and insert the spacer. Then slide the speedometer gear onto the brake side. You may need to spin it around a few times so the tabs line up and the assembly is all the way on. This next part can be a little tricky, but go ahead and slide the wheel on, making sure the brake rotor goes between the pads, and it's hard to show it with the wheel all the way on, but there is a tab on the brake fork that needs to go between the slot on the speedometer gear. It may take a couple tries, but once everything is lined up, slide the axle bolt through, then go ahead and check one more time to make sure everything is in its place, then slide on the washer, thread on the nut, and snug it up slightly. Make sure the dust shield on the spacer is slid in all the way, and it's not a bad idea to check one last time to make sure everything is good. Next, make sure the O-ring is still on the speedometer gear port and insert the cable end. Slowly move the wheel until it lines up and it'll just slide right in. Then thread the cap back on and I'll tighten it up just slightly with some small pliers. Now lower the bike and while holding the axle, torque down the nut to 90 Newton meters. Go ahead and pump the front brake a few times and we are all done. It's also not a bad idea to let it sit overnight if you can and recheck the tire pressure to make sure there are no leaks.
Alright, I'm just out here trying the new tire out for the first time and it feels nice and smooth. And at higher speeds, it feels nice and balanced. But yeah, I really like those balancing beads. Well guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And the next video is going to be a special moto camping trip. So be sure to look out for that one. And I will catch you guys next time. Peace.